beyond the thunder and lightning, past the clouds, over the dark night. She reached up to the sky of stars and caught the red-hot light of the North Star. Opened the earth, walking with blood-soaked feet. She challenged the whip, the gun, the knife. She challenged the fire, pulled from the bodies of slaves, made into laws, prisons, and courts. Screaming white-hot flames and agony, she challenged millions of headhunters, dragging and ripping apart impossible tender moments of time, shipping vessels of history, ancient history, destroying the fabric, the godlike claw of destiny of a people with a gun, a knife, a cannon, building the hideous wall of blood called slavery.
Greetings, welcome back, and thank you all for joining us as always. Ukraine ready to drop NATO membership ambition amid peace talks, according to Al Jazeera and a number of other outlets. President Zelensky says Kyiv could drop its long-held bid for joining alliance in exchange for security guarantees. What does this really mean, and what signals is it sending, if any? Let's connect some dots and find out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
Welcome to the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I am Wilmer Leon. With each show, my guests and I provide insight and analysis into current events and the broader historical context in which most of these events take place. Let's quickly look at a few of today's headlines. The Washington Post reports unemployment rate rises, signaling weaknesses in the economy. The economy added 64,000 jobs in November, but lost far more jobs in October. And the unemployment rate ticked up to 4.6%, the highest levels since the pandemic. As we discussed with Professor Richard Wolff yesterday, despite Trump's telling you that the affordability issue is a hoax, he's not engaging in the politics of policy. He's about the politics of prestidigitation, sleight of hand. Job gains of 64,000 in November exceeded expectations, but only partially offset the loss of 105,000 jobs in October. Those losses, the sharpest since the COVID pandemic era recession, reflected the exit of tens of thousands of federal workers who took a deferred resignation package earlier this year. So basically, this is due in great part to his own policies. Meanwhile, wage growth cooled significantly in November, reflecting new strain on U.S. households as inflation remains elevated. Average hourly wages have risen by 3.5% over the past 12 months to $36.86 an hour. Also, job creation in August was revised down by 22,000 jobs, showing the economy shed 26,000 jobs that month. September job gains were also revised lower by 11,000 to 108,000. Folks, no matter how many drinks the flight attendant serves you, and no matter how many times the pilot comes on and says, everything is fine, you know in the pit of your stomach when the plane is losing altitude. Trust your stomach, not the lying captain. The New York Times reports Venezuela's oil is a focus of Trump's campaign against Venezuelan President Maduro. This is the New York Times. This is not me making this up. In public, the White House says it is confronting Venezuela to curb drug trafficking. Behind the scenes, gaining access to the country's vast oil reserves is the priority. The Nobel Prize recipient made her pitch by live video to a business conference in Miami attended by American executive politicians, including the president. Quote, I'm talking about $1.7 trillion opportunity, Maria Corina Machado said last month, weeks after winning or being given the Peace Prize for challenging President Maduro. She highlighted Venezuela's enormous oil and gas reserves. Quote, we will open all upstream, midstream, downstream to all companies, end quote, as well as its minerals and power infrastructure. Folks, we've been saying on this program, this has nothing to do with drugs. As the BRICS countries and others are moving off of the dollar and the threat of the valuation of oil off of the dollar, Trump is trying to seize the largest reported oil reserve in the world, and he's not fooling anybody. Finally, Dave DeCamp reports an anti-war House to vote this week on bill to block Trump from launching a war with Venezuela. Contact your House representative and tell them to support h.con.res.64. The House is expected to vote this Thursday on a bipartisan war powers resolution aimed at blocking Trump from launching an attack on Venezuela amid a major U.S. military buildup in the Caribbean and threats of a regime change war to oust Venezuelan President Maduro. Again, contact your House representative. Tell them to support h.con.res.64, which directs the president to remove United States armed forces from hostilities within or against Venezuela that have not been authorized by Congress. With all of this hand-wringing and clutching of pearls about how now 90 extrajudicial murders in the Caribbean and the East Pacific have taken place, this is going to be where the rubber meets the road. Who's going to stand up against these murderers? Call your representatives and demand that they support the war resolution. On today's episode, the issue before us is Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has indicated that Kyiv is prepared to drop its long ambition of joining NATO in exchange for Western security guarantees. The Ukrainian leader's suggestion came this past Sunday as he headed to meetings with U.S. envoys and European allies in the German capital of Berlin, admitting that some members of the military alliance are opposed to his country's membership. Is this truly a move forward, or is it a distinction without a difference? What does all of this mean? Let's talk with my guest. He graduated from Columbia University School of Law in 1993. He has served as a labor and human rights lawyer ever since. He taught international human rights law at the University of Pittsburgh School of Law. He is also the author of Syria, Anatomy of Regime Change, and we'll get to Syria in a couple of minutes. He is Dan Kovalik. As always, Dan, welcome back.
Thank you so much, Wilmer. Glad to be here.
Before we get to discussing Venezuela, I want to quickly highlight and then get your take on the president's just despicable comments recently of now I'm forgetting you. We just
Rob
talked
Reiner.
Rob Reiner.
Rob Reiner.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. These despicable comments about the murder of Rob Reiner and his wife. Let's play this audio. This, once again, beyond the pale.
Your statement on Truth Social after the murder of Rob Reiner. Do you stand by that post?
Well, I wasn't a fan of his at all. He was a deranged person as far as Trump is concerned. He said he knew it was false. In fact, it's the exact opposite, that I was a friend of Russia, controlled by Russia. You know, it was the Russia hoax. He was one of the people behind it. I think he hurt himself in career-wise. So he became like a deranged person, Trump derangement syndrome. So I was not a fan of Rob Reiner at all in any way, shape, or form. I thought he was very bad for our country.
Well, he never misses an opportunity to take a shot, and the shot didn't have to be taken. The man is dead, allegedly murdered by his own child with his wife. What humility. Check your audio. You might be muted there. Okay, now we still can. This might be on our end. Let's try that again.
Hello.
There we go.
All right. Yeah, I mean, first of all, by all accounts, Rob Reiner was a prince of a man. I mean, even James Woods, who is a 100% Trumper, said he was very upset by what Trump said. James Woods said it best.
Now we just lost you again. You said James Woods said it best, and then you dropped out on us.
Yeah, he said. James Woods said, "Look, I disagree with Rob Reiner's politics, but he was a great guy, and he loved the guy, and that you can't separate politics from even recognizing the humanity of another person. You know, it's just ridiculous." And also, Rob Reiner should be said. I mean, God, what an influence on our culture. The movies he made, A Few Good Men, and Stand By Me, When Harry Met Sally, The Princess Bride. I mean, these are staples of American cinema. And of course, he was Meathead on All in the Family. That's how I grew up knowing him.
As did I.
And so, yeah, I mean, Trump continues to, in the end, he degrades himself by those kinds of statements, of course.
And he was part of the iconic family of American comedic television. His father, Rob Reiner.
Carl Reiner. Yeah.
with the Dick Van Dyke Show and Andy Griffith, and I mean, so many of the icons of American television, comedic situation comedy. His father damn near created the sitcom.
Yeah, yeah. No,
go ahead.
Yeah. No, it's very true. Actually, I heard a funny anecdote. I guess when Rob Reiner was a kid, he was a teenager. He got in trouble on the set of the Dick Van Dyke Show because he patted Mary Tyler Moore's butt. Anyway,
I ain't mad at him. I said I ain't mad at him.
So anyway, but yeah, that's how far back they go. And Carl Reiner lived till he was about 100. So Rob Reiner probably had decades left in him, which makes it all the more tragic, you know. And again, to be killed by your own son in this apparently what was a very violent way. And again, the Trump couldn't even say, hey, I disagree with the guy, but still, I hope he's in heaven, rest in peace, something like that, you know.
All right. So now to the issues at hand. President Zelensky is now saying that he is prepared to abandon Ukraine's pursuit of NATO membership in exchange for tighter Western security guarantees. Russia responded yesterday, calling the non-NATO status a cornerstone in talks to end the war. You've been to Ukraine a number of times. You've been to Russia a number of times. One of the reasons why I wanted to get your analysis of this. What does this say to you?
Well, it certainly says that Zelensky's losing the war, that he would make this concession. The truth is, had he made this concession 3 years ago, or going on 4 years ago, there never would have been a war, you know, which is sad. It's sad for the Ukrainian people. It's sad for the Russian people. But it shows he's losing, you know.
Well, let me amend that. It shows that he now is recognizing that he's losing.
Yes, well, that's true. I think he is staring down the inevitable.
There you go.
Jaws of defeat. And I hope it means the war's almost coming to an end, but I've thought that for a while, so I don't want to predict that. I hope it's true. But yeah, I mean, I think that's a pretty profound concession he's made. I assume he wouldn't have made it, by the way. I assume if the NATO members didn't allow him to say it, including the United States. So I think it may show also that NATO itself is recognizing that this is a failed effort.
You know, your point regarding admitting that he's losing, and had he done this 4 years ago, we wouldn't have had a war. People need to remember that this started in February of
2022.
22. Yeah. Okay, February of 22. In April of 22, President Putin held up a document and said, we have reached a peace agreement. And the United States sent Boris Johnson into Ukraine to tell Zelensky, under no circumstances will the West back this agreement. And hence, Zelensky found himself stuck as the proxy that Rubio told us he was, found out this is what happens to a proxy. So to your point, and I don't know, well, I do know that Russia has been nothing but consistent in its demands all along. So to your point, we could have ended this a long time ago, saved a whole lot of lives, saved a whole lot of money, and could have been fighting about another thing other than this.
Yeah, and again, it wasn't just because of Zelensky's intransigence on this issue. Clearly, it was about Biden's intransigence on it. Clearly, Biden, you know, reinforced Zelensky's position on joining NATO. So did the rest of the NATO members. None of them were willing to give guarantees about this. So, and that's why we are where we're at now. Where frankly, if Zelensky and the West don't end this war soon, there won't be a Ukraine left. I mean, it'll be entirely annexed by Russia. So yeah, again, it's good he's doing this now, but it's a little too late, I think.
Explain to those what you mean when you say there won't be a Ukraine left, because a lot of people have bought into this lie that Russia is trying to take over Europe, and that as this conflict continues and Russia continues to take land, many people are using this to say, you see, we told you, all he wants to do is take over Europe. But I think, having gone through the Minsk Accords twice, having been lied to at least twice directly, that Putin saying promises aren't going to work this time, ceasefires aren't going to work this time. This is what you're going to surrender, and you're going to surrender on my terms. And right. Until you do, I'm going to keep inserting foot in ass, and I'm going to keep taking land. And the land that I take is the land that I keep, because you started this fight. All I'm doing is finishing it.
Yeah, well, it's very true. I mean, and again, a lot of what led up to the war, Americans were not told about. They weren't told about these Minsk agreements, which were meant to prevent a war and to end Ukraine's war on its own people in the Donbass. But Ukraine never abided by it, and we learned from Angela Merkel of Germany and Macron of France that the West never intended that they would honor it. And also, the weekend before Russia's military operations began in Ukraine in February 2022, there were 2,000 documented instances of ceasefire violations, mostly by Ukraine, against the Donbass. So, and one of the big reasons Russia went in was to protect the people, the majority of whom are Russian speakers, of the Donbass. But we're not told that. In fact, I saw one of the people who've told the truth about this is a guy named Jacques, is it Baud, B-A-U-D, I believe? He's a Swiss intelligence officer. He was actually, he did work for NATO for some time. In any case, I just saw he was sanctioned because of his telling the truth about what really happened in Ukraine.
The EU has placed a former Swiss Army officer on its sanctions list. Ex-Colonel Jacques Baud undermined the stability of Ukraine with pro-Russian propaganda and conspiracy theories.
There you go. There you go. We live in a time of censorship, especially, in the West, where if you speak the truth, particularly about Russia, about Palestine, you're going to be sanctioned. You saw even George Galloway, 7 times he was elected Minister of Parliament in Great Britain. He's had to go into exile.
Mm-hmm.
I actually saw a funny meme today. It was this woman's asking a guy, she goes, how is it in the UK these days? And the guy answers, "Oh, I can't complain." And she says, "That's good." He says, "Well, I can't complain because if I do, I'll be arrested." Anyway, you know, that's pretty much where we're at. But yeah, actually, Jacques Baude's book, he's got a couple. He's got one specifically on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. He also has another dissecting the lies of the West on various issues like Syria, Venezuela, Ukraine, and kind of very worthwhile reading. And again, the fact they're sanctioning him probably tells you that what he's saying is important. So
final point on this. You mentioned the Donbass, and I need for there are many who probably don't understand the significance of the Donbass. One of the things you were talking about, points of reality that most folks in the West don't know. There's a section in Ukraine called the Donbass region. Ethnic Russians, they speak Russian, they practice the religion of the Russian Orthodox Church. They have been under an ethnic cleansing campaign by the Nazis in Ukraine. They were being ethnically cleansed for about 8 years, and they had been begging President Putin to intervene. And for about 6 years, he kept saying, no, I don't want to do this.
Really, it was 8 years.
Okay.
It was 8 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
He was saying, I understand what I'm trying to be drawn into. This could result in a much larger conflagration. So he was trying to figure out a diplomatic way to save these people, and who were being, again, ethnically cleansed by Ukrainian Nazi nationalists. And it was only after about 8 years of being begged by these people to intervene that he finally acquiesced. So this is another data point that folks in the West don't understand or refuse to admit.
Yeah, in fact, 14,000 people were killed in the conflict between the government of Kiev and Donbass. 14,000 before Russia intervened in February 2022. And that, you know, that's recognized by the United Nations, that death toll. But again, Americans don't know that. Also, by the way, it should be said, about 500,000 before Russia even intervened, about 500,000 people in the Donbass had Russian passports.
Mm-hmm.
The Donbass was known as the heart of the Russian Revolution, even in 1917. The Donbass was a very critical part of Russia for a very long time, and the Soviet Union later. And actually, many people in the Donbass can still consider themselves Soviet peoples. And there's Soviet cafes there I visited. But I can tell you this for sure, Wilmer, after being in the Donbass several times since 2022, that the people in the Donbass are glad Russia intervened.
Yes, they are.
And if people don't understand that truth, they don't understand this war. And they will never go back to Ukraine, ever. And
they voted to secede.
They voted to secede in 2014, and then in 2022 voted to be part of Russia.
And folks, please forgive us, some of you. Please forgive us for confusing you with the facts. But these are the facts.
Yes. And by the way, Russia has been rebuilding the Donbass and rebuilding Mariupol, which was destroyed in the war. The people are glad they're part of Russia. And again, and I have many friends there I keep in touch with. I know that is the sentiment there. And again, the West doesn't want people to know that reality.
The West doesn't want people to know that reality. Waterways, thank you for that super sticker. Waterways says, thank you, Wilmer, and it's Dan, for the insight and discussion. That's what we do here every day, Monday through Friday. So Waterways, thank you very much. Let's move on to a place you know incredibly well, Syria. Syrian who killed U.S. soldiers was member of security forces, officials say. The gunman who killed 2 U.S. soldiers and an American civilian interpreter had been set to be dismissed from the security forces over his extremist views, U.S. and Syrian officials said. What does this mean to you, Dan Kovalik?
Well, again, should not be surprising to people because the new government in Syria is Al Qaeda. That's who they are. They rename themselves, but they're Al Qaeda. That's who the U.S. and the West backed to take over Syria. That's who's in charge. And as usual, the support for these types of terrorist groups, and that's what they are, ends up coming back to bite us. They will do this from time to time. They will bite the hand that feeds them. And that's an example of what happened. And of course, Syria and the U.S. trying to cover their tracks and trying to, again, not wanting the American people to understand what really has happened there, or saying, oh, well, he was an extremist about to be fired. Like, really? Then why wasn't he fired? I mean, obviously this is just ass covering.
Oh, wait a minute, Dan. You come on now. You went to Columbia Law School. You understand 30 days written notice before you fire a terrorist. Otherwise, you could be brought up on charges. What if he went to HR?
There you go. Yeah, or got his union rep involved. It's really incredible. But that's the least of it. I mean, what's happening is the new government is engaged in its own ethnic cleansing campaign of Alawites, Christians, Druze, destroying churches and ancient ruins. It set up a religious caliphate in Syria, which we knew would happen, because you know who said that was what was happening? Is the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency in 2012. It said in a document now declassified that the West was supporting Al Qaeda and that Al Qaeda was trying to set up a religious caliphate in Syria. So what has happened, what is happening, the U.S. knew all the time would happen. And that this isn't being pointed out by the Western press, that El Jilani, the new Al Qaeda president of Syria, was allowed to walk the streets of New York City to go to the UN on the anniversary of 9/11, really tells you something, and that the press didn't even bother to point that out. It's quite shocking.
Well, let me read what the press did point out. This is, and I read this whenever, I think it's important for people to know this whenever Al Jilani's name is mentioned. This is from the Wall Street Journal. Once affiliated with Islamic State and Al Qaeda, Jilani professes religious tolerance. Many have doubts. Abu Muhammad al-Jilani boarded a bus in Damascus, which is in Syria, in March of 2003, heading across the desert to Baghdad with fellow volunteers eager to repel the looming American invasions of Iraq. When he returned home in 2011, after a 5-year stint in an American-run prison camp in Iraq, it was as the emissary of Islamic State founder Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. Jilani arrived in Syria with bags full of cash and a mission to take the extremist movement global. Last week, 42-year-old Jilani triumphantly entered Aleppo, Syria's second largest city, as the leading commander of the Turkish-backed rebel force dominated by his group, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. Unexpected and swift, his victory marks one of the most dramatic moments in a Middle East that has no shortage of drama. So This is the guy that the United States has backed as the president of Syria, helping to overthrow the former president,
Bashir
Bashir
al-Assad.
al-Assad. And we put our money on this guy?
Yeah. Well, in fact, and we need to back up and repeat what you just said, and that for your audience. He was in custody of the United States in Baghdad after having been part of the Islamic State. After attacking U.S. forces, he was captured. He was being held at a U.S. military base. Somehow he walks out of the base with cash in hand, arms in hand, and crosses into Syria to be part of the anti-Assad forces that the U.S. was supporting. Does anyone find that at all suspicious? Obviously, he was a U.S. asset even when he crossed over into Syria. Obviously. Just like bin Laden had been a U.S. asset in Afghanistan. This is, part of U.S. foreign policy for decades, supporting these types of people. And then we pretend that the U.S. doesn't do it, right? You're a conspiracy theorist if you say they support these terrorist groups. It is 1984. It's Orwell's 1984. Do not look at the man behind the curtain. Sorry, mixing my metaphors or
I'm with you. You're absolutely right.
My books. But, that is the truth. And people, especially veterans of the United States who fought in theaters against ISIS and Al Qaeda, that they must be devastated to see this, right? That they lost limbs, they lost comrades, to fight these terrorist groups, all the while to realize the U.S. was supporting them.
This shows you the fallacy of the U.S. policy. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. This guy is a head chopper.
Yeah, he admits that. He admits that he
literally.
He says, though, he was chopping people's heads off in his youth, but he said that was a little youthful indiscretion, right? Some people, they drink a bit in their youth. They may skip school. They may do some graffiti. He cut people's heads off. Boys will be boys.
Didn't you when you were hanging out? I don't know if you're in a fraternity, but I mean, hey, let's go chop a few heads.
Yeah. All's forgiven. It's really incredible. It's incredible the world we live in, the world of lies.
Well, and thank you for saying that, because to that point, the world of lies. When you listen to the narrative about this now, when you listen to the narrative about the American soldiers being killed and who killed them, they're not connecting these dots.
Right.
There's none. When you listen to MSNBC, when you listen to or MS Now, if that's whatever the hell they want to call it, none of this is being discussed. None of the pundits sitting at the table are saying, hold on, folks, we need to ask ourselves a couple questions here. How are we working with this guy? How much are we paying this guy? How could we trust this guy? They're saying, oh, now ISIS has reemerged. ISIS is once. It never went anywhere.
It never went anywhere. Of course not, because the U.S. has kept it on life support, because it advances U.S. interests. By the way, I always remind people, and I mention this article probably every time I talk to you, but people should go back and read Seymour Hersh's The Redirection from 2007, where he talks about how the U.S. by 2005 was working with these groups. these terrorist groups to go after countries like Libya and Syria and Iran.
You know, to the point, folks need to pay an awful lot of attention to Cy Hirsch.
Yeah.
Because he's the one that basically exposed the
My Lai massacre.
That's yes.
Abu Ghraib.
Yes.
Yes.
The blowing up of the Nord Stream pipeline.
Yes. Yes.
The man is just what I'm trying. Excuse me for going to my phone. What I'm trying to do is there's a photograph that you sent me a while ago that I'm trying to post. You sent this from Syria when you were on the border, and so folks, that's why I keep looking at my phone. I'm not being rude to my guest. I'm trying to forward this photograph because I think this photograph speaks volumes, and we'll get to that in a minute. We'll come back to that once it's up and ready to be posted. Let's move on to while we're waiting for that. Politico reports he's going to be next. Trump threatens Colombian president. Trump's comments marked a steep escalation in his threats against the country. Trump ratcheted up his threats against Colombia last week, telling reporters Colombian President Gustavo Petro is, quote unquote, next in the White House's regional campaign against drug trafficking. And for full disclosure, okay, you know what? Before we get there, let's do this. The photograph is up. If we could bring yes. You sent this to me, what, about 2 years ago?
Yeah, maybe not even that long ago. Yeah, probably a year and a half ago, something like that. Yeah.
If you could set the scene for us, please, and then we'll go to Colombia.
Yeah, well, that was actually taken in Lebanon. You're right, not far from the Syrian border. And this is a home that was destroyed by Israel. Remember, Israel was attacking, was still attacking Lebanon. But this was at the time Israel was really engaged in a full-scale war against Lebanon. And this is in an ancient town in Lebanon that has these beautiful ancient Roman ruins. And actually, Israel came very close to hitting the Roman ruins. But this is a house that has been utterly demolished by an Israeli bomb or missile. And this child was just sitting there on top of the rubble. I thought it was a very moving photo. That's why I took it. So
did you have a chance to speak with him by chance?
I did not speak to him because I didn't really want to bother him. He seemed kind of like a child, kind of in his own world. But I talked to the woman who owned the house.
Oh, okay.
And she was crying. Of course, it looked like it had been a beautiful house. Part of it was still standing, and she said, "This is my house. Look at it now. You know, it's gone."
You can see the house behind him.
You can see it was like that. It was gorgeous. It was like a mansion. And it's gone. You know, so. And again, we should remember that Israel's continuing to attack Lebanon, even though there's a peace agreement that was signed, that's been in place now for a couple of years, and maybe not that long, certainly a year and a half. And again, as they say, when Israel signs a ceasefire, it means the other side ceases and Israel keeps firing. So
now to Colombia. President Petro is next. And for full disclosure, not only do you know President Gustavo Petro, you are now legal counsel for him.
Yes.
Dan Kovalik.
Yeah, so I've known Gustavo Petro for about 20 years because I've been very involved in Colombia for actually about 26 years now. It's incredible how time flies. And I met him when he was a senator, and he and I were doing similar work, denouncing the paramilitary groups, the death squads in Colombia that the U.S. was supporting, at least indirectly at that time. And anyway, yeah, now I represent him for purposes of trying to get him off this OFAC list, this blacklist that is a kind of a joint project of the State Department and the U.S. Treasury. If you're on this list, you're basically economically blacklisted. It's very hard to do any business because the U.S. is so dominant in the world economy. You can't do banking. You can't travel to the U.S. You can't travel on carriers. Airlines that are American or any that do business with the U.S., which is pretty much every carrier. And, we're pretty certain that was done, that he was put on that blacklist because of his support, very unflinching support for Palestine, because he will not support an invasion of Venezuela. And now, as you say, now Trump is escalating, saying that he may try to overthrow Petro, even though it should be noted that Gustavo Petro was democratically elected in Colombia. There's no question about this. Not one person denies that he was democratically elected. I actually was at his inauguration in 2022. And Trump is saying he may engage in regime change against him.
I'm glad you brought that up because we keep hearing conversations. I'm switching now the conversation to Venezuela. We keep hearing references to Maduro being an authoritarian, to Maduro being a dictator, that he lost the last election. Everyone that I've spoken with, and you have been an election observer. You went to Syria.
I was an election observer in Syria. I was an election observer in Venezuela many times.
Okay.
And in Nicaragua and in El Salvador.
Yes. So can you speak to the narrative? Because in just about every Western published article or story that I read or hear where Maduro's name is mentioned, it's usually preceded by Venezuelan dictator or preceded by or followed by Venezuelan strongman, Venezuelan authoritarian. So if you could speak to those references, those descriptions of him, and whether or not he is in fact the democratically elected president of Venezuela.
Yes, he has stood for elections 3 times. I was an observer twice for his election, and he won 3 times. And with a system that Jimmy Carter had called the best electoral system in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And the last election, the opposition cried foul, said it was fraudulent, but they never showed any evidence of this. They were allowed to present evidence, and they didn't present any evidence because they didn't have any. And so I think there's no evidence to suggest that he hasn't been democratically elected. And honestly, it's up to the Venezuelan people to decide whether their procedures were followed or not. I always say, we've had some elections that were a little fishy, like the 2000 election. Do you remember that one?
I do.
Even the 2004 election with Kerry, that wasn't as well publicized, but there's a lot of thought that Ohio had been stolen, and that would have turned the election to Kerry. The point is, that's up for us to deal with. No one ever suggested not recognizing George W. Bush in 2000, mm-hmm. even though that clearly Gore had won that had the votes been recounted in Florida.
In fact, wait a minute. Let me tell you just a very quick story.
Yeah,
I'm watching that election night, and Tom Brokaw. I'm watching NBC. And Tom Brokaw calls the election for Gore. And about 10 minutes, 15, not more than 15 minutes later, Brokaw comes back and says, we have to take Florida off the board because there's a part of Florida that's in a different time zone. And the results from northwest, I guess, has not, closer to, I guess, Louisiana, has not come in yet. I picked up the phone immediately and I called my mentor, Dr. Ronald Walters, and I said, Dr. Walters, what is this? And he said, Wilmer, you're watching the theft of an American election. He said the exit polling is now to such a degree that those numbers aren't wrong. Al Gore won Florida, and now they're stealing it.
Right.
No,
and I think that's pretty certain. The Supreme Court then ratified that theft. But again, that was for us to deal with as Americans.
That's
in
the
point. End, we didn't really deal with it. But no one suggested, you can't recognize George W. Bush. It's an internal issue, and that's true in Venezuela. You just don't go overthrowing governments because you decide you don't like their electoral process. And again, you look at Saudi Arabia, it's a monarchy. It doesn't even purport to be democratic, and it's a very close ally of the United States. Right. So, I mean, it's not about democracy. Again, we already said it's not about drugs either. It's about oil. It's about control and domination.
It wasn't about democracy in Ukraine as much as they told us that we had to defend democracy in Ukraine. We overthrew the democratically elected president in Ukraine
in 2014.
Thank you, Victoria.
And Zelensky, his term ran out quite a while ago. Again, I forget exactly how long, but I think it's now been going on 2 years.
2 years.
And constitutionally, he does not even have the right to be president. But again, no one seems to care about that. He decided he wouldn't have elections. Even though, remember that Abraham Lincoln held elections during the Civil War. So, I mean, it's possible. And Russia held elections within the 4 regions that voted to go to Russia. So, again, it's all opportunistic. It's what the U.S. cares about democracy when it suits it. Otherwise, it doesn't.
Final issue for you. Trump administration denies that bombing of 21 boats in the Caribbean amounts to murder. I teach international human rights law. That's your field of expertise. There are a couple of things here. One is trafficking drugs is not a crime punishable by death.
Right. Correct.
When they blew up the boat in September and those 2 survivors were clinging to wreckage, whether they had radios or not, whether they were using sign language or not, you're obligated to rescue them. That's right. An international, you're obligated to rescue them, not send another missile 45 minutes later, vaporizing them and sending what's ever left to the bottom of the ocean. I have been saying that to focus on those 2 is a distraction. We're now up to 90 cases of
95 as of last night.
I'm sorry. Excuse me.
Yeah. 90, the toll keeps rising. Yes.
90. We're up to 95 cases of murder. Dan Kovalik.
No question. No question. There's no difference between what the U.S. is doing with these boats than if I went up to someone on the street and said, hey, this guy's a drug trafficker, and a cop comes by and blows that guy's brains out based on the mere allegation. No one believes that in a civilized society you should do that. If you believe someone is doing something wrong, if they're trafficking in drugs, they should be apprehended in a lawful way. They should be tried before a court, a legitimate court, convicted. And as you mentioned, even if they were convicted in a death penalty state, they would not be put to death because drug trafficking is not a capital crime. So blowing these people out of the water without having tried them is murder. That's all it is. It's murder. And Human Rights Watch just put out a report today saying that very thing, that it's murder. And I think a second admiral of the United States has now resigned.
I didn't see that. That must have happened yesterday. Uh-oh. Do we lose Dan? I hope they did. A second admiral. Let me see if I can quickly. Stay with me, folks. Stay with me, folks. Oh, okay. I don't see that. They're talking about all I see in this is that Halsey has resigned. So we'll have to see if we can get Dan back. There, I think we got him. There we go. Nope, we got him, then we lost him. Where are you? Okay, there we go.
Hello, sorry about that. I don't know what happened. All right,
not a problem. So
was I right? Was there a second admiral?
No. Well, I've just tried to pull that up, and all they're talking about is Halsey.
Okay, I saw another news report, so I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, at least one admiral's resigned. But in any case, this is not how a civilized country conducts itself. Americans should be outraged by this. I think many are. I think the polls show certainly a majority of Americans are outraged. It's not just murder, it's terrorism, right? Because terrorism is inflicting harm on civilians for a political end. And in this case, they're inflicting harm, murdering civilians for a political end, and that is regime change in Venezuela. That's what this is about. I think what they want is for Venezuela to react to this and then use how it reacts as a justification to invade Venezuela, right? I mean, I think that's what's happening here. And they're really upping it. As I mentioned, I believe last night, 3 boats were destroyed. 8 people were killed. So this isn't abating, it's accelerating. I think at a time that the U.S. is very intent on invading Venezuela. And it's quite troubling.
You know, people need to understand the United States didn't murder Manuel Noriega. We captured Noriega, brought him to the United States. He was put on trial. He was convicted of drug trafficking and sent to prison. El Chapo, the United States did not murder El Chapo. He was brought to the United States. He was brought to court, convicted, sitting in prison. I'm trying to remember the guy before El Chapo that was, I think, in the head of the Medellin cartel.
Well, that would have been Escobar. He was killed.
Right, but Pablo Escobar was killed, but the United States didn't send a missile into his compound. You would know this better than I. What I understand is they went to arrest him, and a gunfight broke out, and he died as a result of the gunfight.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Okay. So my point is, yeah, he died at the hands of the United States, but they went in to arrest him. They did not send a missile into his compound.
Right.
And Donald Trump has released the president of
Honduras, who was convicted of drug trafficking to the United States. And he did it just as we're blowing up these boats. I mean, almost to send a message like, I do not need to be consistent.
the hypocrisy here is just utterly nauseating.
Yes.
So what do you so as I understand it also, there were before they blew the two guys out of the water. I'm sorry, after they blew those two guys out of the water, there were two more survivors that they did capture. There was a day where they were saying they were going to bring them to the United States and try them, but what they wound up doing was sending them back to their respective countries.
Because they had no evidence against them. Right. Exactly.
Wow. All right. Well, all I can say is stay tuned, folks. Just when you think it can't get any more insane, there's going to be more insanity afoot. And so, Dan, where do people go to get your books? Where do people go to contact and tap into more of the brilliance and wisdom of Dan Kovalik?
Well, thank you, Wilmer, for asking. You can go to my Twitter account at Daniel M. Kovalik. You can get books like The Syria Anatomy of a Regime Change on Amazon, or from my publisher. That publisher is Baraka Books. The other publisher I've used many times is skyhorsepublishing.com.
And I also, we got to give credit to Dr. Jeremy Kuzmarov, who's the co-author with you on the Syria book.
Correct. Yes, he was
phenomenal.
Yes, and a pleasure to work with, by the way. Yes.
In fact, I'm gonna reach out to him because it's been a while since I've had him on. I got to reach out to Jeremy and get him back as a brilliant guy in his own right.
Sounds good.
Pauline Douglas, thank you for that $10 super sticker. Greatly appreciate that. As always, Professor Dan Kovalik, man, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Wilmer. Merry Christmas to you and to your audience. Best and Happy New Year. Thank you.
Same to you.
Cheers.
Folks, thank you all so much for listening to the Connecting the Dots podcast with me, Dr. Wilmer Leon. Stay tuned. New show tomorrow. Laith Maroof will join us. Laith is going to join us tomorrow, so you want to jump in on that one real quick, real early, because again, as the Moon Man would say, it's going to be a big one. Please follow, subscribe, leave a review, share the show. We're running out of time here. In all seriousness, we could be down to our last week if we aren't able to raise some significant funds. And this is not free. This is not cheap. And well, basically run out of money. So if you can help us, please do. If you can't, we understand. But again, we're probably down to about a week before we're going to have to throw the flag on the field and call it a day. Please follow us on social media. All the links are below in the show description. And remember that this is where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge. Talk without analysis is just chatter. And we don't chatter here on Connecting the Dots. See y'all tomorrow. Laith Maroof will join us. Until then, have a blessed remainder of your day. I am Dr. Wilmer Leon. Peace. I'm out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.